Welcome to Old Man Energy. I'm your host, Flint Anderson, and we have Warren Marlowe with us today. As always, we are glad you guys are joining us. We hope you enjoy our conversation. If you guys caught my appearance on his podcast, pretty much this is a continuation of that discussion. As always, if you don't subscribe to me already, you don't subscribe, do all the things, and you need to go do that to make sure you get the content. Also, all the social media platforms, links are below. I post different content daily, and we got a lot of really cool stuff coming up you are not going to want to miss. I'm going to touch base on that later on in the episode. But for now, let's welcome Warren. Warren, appreciate you, bud. Thanks for jumping on here.
What's going on, Flint? How you doing, man?
I started out early today, was already behind by 7 o'clock. As you can see, I had to ask you to indulge me so I could actually eat something.
Gotta get the protein in. Gotta get it in.
Gotta get it in. I honestly got distracted at the gym this morning. And not really distracted. I was just kind of in the zone and the flow was going. And I was like, yes. And I looked down at my watch and I had 20 minutes to shower and get to my first appointment. I'm like, oh, crap. And I didn't bring the clothes with me, so I had to drive home.
I love how that feeling is because you're like, man, I got so much time to go work out. Like, I use the example, like when I have like my daughter, I usually drop her off at 8 o'clock. I'm like, oh, I can go work out, whatever, during the day, whatever. But you forget how crowded the gyms can be at this time of the day. You know, people get ready to go to work and stuff like that. And I was just like, all right, man, I'm going to go in here. Because I used to do was what I'll do is like a warm up, like a cardio warm up for 20 minutes.
I'm sorry.
Big adamant on row, especially me being in the ring and stuff. Want to work on keeping a pace standpoint. So I've been big on rowing, which I don't really do a lot of cardio. The rowing machine is pretty much all you're going to get out of me for right now. I'll do a minute on, just full blast. And then every 4 minutes in that 20-minute mark, I would just like pace myself through. And man, when I tell you, I'm thinking like, oh, I'll have plenty of time, whatever. I look at the clock, it's like 10:30. I'm like, oh, crap, man, I got to get ready to get back and go get her. And it's just like, dang, man, it's like you get in that zone. It feels good. You know for a fact, hey, this is all improvement scenario to you. And then it's like, dang, I'm actually getting rushed on my free time. Like, it's like when you just can't win.
That's a terrible feeling. For those of my guys that are watching this that don't know, Warren is a professional wrestler, fellow meathead, gym rat, and dad of a young kiddo.
This guy right here's got a mind of his own. We'll just put it that way.
I got you. Tell us a little bit about that, man. How did you get started doing that, or how'd you choose to do that? I'm curious to hear your story on that.
So basically, all the stuff that I've been through, I've had somehow, some way, not planned in any possible way. A door was always waiting for me, even though I was waiting for when I'm thinking I'm in the content standpoint, like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to enjoy it, keep going, whatever. And then obviously me being a dad, transitioned from me playing college basketball because you dribbling a ball and having a baby at 21 it's kind of tough. I know a lot of people want to say something, but it's hard. Okay. I never got sleep. I'm sitting there dribbling 2 balls, and might I add, I'm white and I'm only 5'8". Playing basketball, so you do the math, you can figure that out. I wasn't dunking or anything. I was known to shoot. And obviously me coming into college was a whole different position than I ever was used to. I had to learn how to play point guard. If anybody knows basketball, point guard is the quarterback of a basketball court, basically standpoint. And I, as good as a shooter I was in high school, I didn't have to worry about ball handling skills. I'm just waiting on the corner and I'm shooting a 3. And that was all I was really worried about. College was a whole different transition. Everything that I thought I could kind of ease myself through and stay away from, that was thrown out. And I mean, I'm pushing myself, dribbling, trying to learn how to dribble 2 balls, trying to get between the legs, up and down without looking at the ball and stuff like that. And then found out I'm playing around, got to be a dad at the same time. I'm not sleeping at all because my biggest problem is, and this is a good and a bad trait, when I'm determined, I'm locked in. If anybody knows what locked in means, like literally eat, sleep, and live that thing to improve and increase into the scenario. Long story short, being a dad, stuff like that, I had it with a girl that I was with in high school for a long time. And, high school relationships just don't last. I mean, I guess that's the best way to put it. It's the typical storyline. She said she was done and up and left with my kid, and I didn't get to see him for a certain amount of time. Had to go to the court system just to get in my kid's life again, just because we weren't married. And got in the courtroom, didn't get to hear exactly anything that I felt like anybody would want to hear, other than, hey, you're in your kid's life now, but you're going to be told when you could have them, when you can't have them, and stuff like that. Instead of going to Georgia and doing something bad, somebody gave me, I looked at an ad on TV. I was watching YouTube and something popped up, said, oh, something in Jacksonville, Florida. And I went and messaged the guy, and I decided, hey, I've watched pro wrestling since I was 5 years old. Let's try it. What's the worst going to happen? I'm going through this right now. I'm thinking this is the absolute lowest, whatever. I need to find something hobby-wise. It's pretty bad when I'm irritated and so messed up, I couldn't even go to the gym to work out because I was really messed up psychologically. And basically got into pro wrestling, said I'm going to try it, got in there, got excited. And the funny thing is a lot of people would usually be hesitant on the bump scenario. I had no problem. I flung myself. I'm like, bro, I'm already at the worst. Oh, you got to tuck your chin in. Okay. Just start, keep going like this. And I think I really excelled quicker than he would have thought. And obviously, if anybody doesn't know the background of wrestling, we were doing the basics, the chain wrestling, the collar and elbow, stuff like that. Make it believable to make it look like you're really hurting somebody, which you're really not, but in the same genre. But did that outside the ring for freaking 3 months. I could probably done it in my sleep. I was so bored with it at times, just like, man, I want to learn the new stuff. And then he pitched an idea. What do you think about wearing a mask? What? What do you think about wearing a mask? I was like, I told you, I'm not going on the top rope. I'm not doing all those crazy flippy things. I want to be like, kind of like a Randy Orton character or something like that. Because I had a good frame. I had a nice face. Like, I could have been something like that. And he was like, what do you think about a mask? I was like, he's like, well, you look too nervous when you smile too much. That was my problem. I'm getting punched in the face and I'm smiling. Like, it was a really cool enjoyment for me because, like I said, man, I've been watching wrestling since I was like 5 years old. So for me to believe, like, dang, I'm actually doing this, like, I could be the next Rock. I could be the next thing, like, in my mind. And it's so funny, like, I got in, started thinking about the idea of the mask, and I was like, all right, doesn't sound bad. And then I started watching guys like, with Del Wilkes. If anybody doesn't know, that was the Patriot in WWF and stuff like that. And I always noticed that was only one particular mask that everyone could find. So I found someone in New Japan that would finally give me a good rate standpoint. Like, I was blown away how much somebody would charge someone to make a mask. Gave me a good rate, and I said, all right, I want 2 combos. Spider-Man meets Power Rangers. If anybody doesn't know, another character came out, and it came back. It looked really cool. I wasn't super big on the Marvel genre with Deadpool at the time, so I wasn't full familiar with them in the comic standpoint, but it came out to the American Deadpool. And that was the thing that happened. And the funny thing is, before I debuted, not even 2 weeks before, the movie Deadpool was announced. That was about to come out. So Ryan Reynolds really made it tough for a good old AP to start the pro wrestling genre. But I stuck with it because I was like, man, I paid a lot of money for this mask. It's going to go. We going to ride with it. Like, I don't care. And it went from just trying it out to absolutely just loving it. Me always being in a competitive backstory with sports and stuff like that, man, I lived for it. And I thought it was something really cool because it was like an escape standpoint, because some wrestlers, they, in a way, you wanted to believe themselves, but it's just a level 100 type scenario. It might be somebody, but they're a lot louder type scenario. I wanted a whole different transition because I'm big on superheroes, big on Superman, Batman, stuff like that. So I was like, all right, Warren Marlowe's Clark Kent. American Prodigy is going to be the Super. And man, when I tell you the tough stuff that I was going on, at home and stuff like that, American Prodigy was literally like God's gift, man. Like people looked at him so high and mighty. Like the reaction when I first got out there, and like I said, when I first tried this, the kids' reaction, man, it's like watching how I used to react when I watched The Rock and Cena and all these people, and kids were just messaging me left and right, like, when you coming to our town? When you coming to our town? Like, it was so cool, man. And then when I started, obviously, this is when I started learning how to play around with social media, and then I had to learn how to network standpoint because, after I graduated wrestling school, now I'm out in the world, like, I got to go and do these bookings and stuff. And then I realized the booking fee is not as much as you want it to be. So they were like, hey, you're going to have to start selling t-shirts, you're going to have to start making apparels, you're going to have to brand yourself. And that was a transition for real because I joke with people. I would know for a fact I would never have been built for a car salesman job because you ask me if there's something really wrong with somebody, I wouldn't be able to sell it to you and be like, yeah, hey, it cranks good. You go up down the road. Yeah, if it messes up, I don't know. Maybe you turned it too hard or something. I don't know. But it's like I learned so much in a business aspect that 1 year being a pro wrestler compared to I've done in school, in college and stuff like that. So it was really a cool transition.
What was your biggest lesson from that year? I'm curious. It can be business or wrestling, but what's the biggest lesson?
The biggest thing, obviously, when you're a pro wrestler and stuff, you always want to have an ego that people know you. And that was my biggest, toughest thing was like, not every promotion knew who I was. And I took a little offense to it because, I busted my tail. My first year I was ranked in the top 100s in Florida, which is a huge exception. And especially my first year, especially this character, it doesn't really get over in the standpoint like, it's going to be super popular. It might have that old Southern crowd, and that might be the one hit wonder type scenario. But it got over very well with the character, the look, presentation. People used to tell me they'd rather me wrestle in a shirt so they feel more comfortable going against me, which was kind of funny at the same time. Because I had a bunch of guys that were like, they were trying the no carb diet and stuff, and I'm sitting there eating burgers and stuff in front of them, like it would piss them off. So it's just like I had to learn control, balance, and more importantly, I had to learn, like I just said, brand myself. Like I had to learn how to go out and be like, hey, I'm here, take this fee. Can I get a table? I've got t-shirts, I got masks, I got stickers. Like I had to kind of learn how to sell myself to a promoter because at the time, I'm thinking, they've seen my tape. They're going to reach out to me. And that only worked half a year. And then they're like, hey, we got to cancel a booking. And that was the thing that really bugged me is when something canceled, I didn't have anything to follow up on. So I'm like, I've already had this travel covered. I already got all this. I'm still going to fly out there at the time. And it's like, crap. And I can't refund the ticket for the air fee because it's like literally the day of it. And I'm just like, okay, that's when I learned, all right, we're going to learn how to pick the scenarios of how to take the promotions and stuff. Because at first I just took everything. And that was my biggest downfall is I got to stop. I got to learn how to say no. That was a big thing for me.
It's difficult to make those choices in any business.
It is, man.
You got it. You can't. At the beginning, it's like shotgun approach. We want to take everything. We want to do it all. We're chasing everything. And then you realize you really have to start drilling down into what's actually making you money because we spend a lot of time on stuff that doesn't do anything.
Oh my gosh. Like obviously with this podcast too, man, like I'm thinking, oh man, you just record it, send it. No editing, that's what they got that for. And man, when I got to my third episode, they looked at me and said, you got to edit these things, right? Like literally you got 1 hour and 40 minutes of this and some of it's just static. Like, do you know that you could edit this thing? And funny thing is, Anchor called me and gave me an hour tutorial how to do this stuff. It was really cool. And I appreciate Jonathan from whatever chat he called me off of because I mean, a lot of people talking about Anchor reached out to you to help you. I was like, yeah, man, like they told me everything if I wasn't keen on learning how to do something, which was a relief doing it on a phone, because I mean, you're just touch screening, you're just having to highlight it, click it out, clip it in, insert the next, whatever. That was the toughest thing when it came to those scenarios. But I was just like, yeah, man, just record it, send it, record it, send it. And they were like, yeah, you know, you need to edit these things, right, buddy? You can't just be given a static and wall electricity. I don't know what was going on in that episode.
When I started Old Man Energy, I knew what I didn't know, and got a good producer who handles that for me. Nicole has been definitely a blessing as far as being able to edit and what have you. Because I'm you. Start out making videos in the truck after the gym, just send them out of breath, sweaty. It's like, oh God, you can hear the people driving by, the sirens. It's like,
oh man.
It's funny how some of that can become associated with your brand, but if you want to move up and you want to be a different level. So I still do those videos to this day, but they're not the podcast videos and they're not the ones that are edited and stuff like that. So
it's more of that professional standpoint, stuff like that. Like you just said, when I was playing with Anchor, because like I had a lot of, when I got really built up, I started doing pre-recorded interviews. So what I would do is pick that interview, regardless when I recorded it or whatever, and still update it with just a newer recording of my voice, make it look like it's more up-to-date thing. Because that was one thing I did learn at wrestling. You know, the fans don't know when, where, and how it happened. So you could play with it and just see if they could ride with it. And it always worked. But like you just said, I'm in my car, I'm thinking no echo. And of course, my car just shooting straight on through with you. And it's just like, every time I found a way to hit record, something with noise found a way to come near me. And it was like, and I tried to do it with the car cranked at the time, trying to avoid the thing. All you heard was the car crank at the time. So I was just like, bro, I was like, well, we can't win. So we'll just figure something out. So I would just sit there and auto-tune it. And I learned how to do that. And it was an interesting thing for our first 2 episodes, but I was just like, this sounds terrible. Even though people are telling me they liked the interview, I know why. I'm pretty sure all of them were skipping the opening. They're like, get to the interview. Because of that auto-tune was so bad. Because I wasn't listening to it at the time, and someone told me, hey, get a listen, whatever. Because one of my friends was talking about they wanted to check it out. So I was like, all right. So we just listened to it in the car, and I'm like, what is this?
This is not what I built.
That is not my voice.
By the way, his podcast is Buzzing with Marlo, and he has an absolutely kick-ass intro. Now it's cool as shit.
It's not auto-tuned. Let's put it this way.
It's not auto-tuned. It's animated. It's cool as shit. I was sitting there watching it, waiting for the appearance. I'm like, damn. And I thought
Batman
was
thing.
Cool.
Everybody loves it, man. Everybody keeps talking about it. It's like, how'd you get that Batman thing? I was like, a lot of time on the computer and just. I had too much time on my hands to go around last week.
Sitting there doing it. Now, to shift gears a little bit here, and we may come back to this. I don't know. Last time we talked for an hour and a half, and we only actually talked about one topic, I think, for 15 minutes.
We sold it for 15.
That's right. I was like, all right, we got it. But it was a great conversation. I hope people get a lot out of it. You mentioned something earlier, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, because obviously got a lot of guys. I've got a lot of guys our age, and then I got a lot of younger guys that watch Old Man Energy, and they really, we try and give back as much as we can. So you mentioned several things about having to go to court for your son. This is your oldest child, and not forcing yourself back into his life, but basically force the issue that you needed to be in his life. So you did that. And yet you've chosen now to get married and have another child. Explain to us how you went from how you overcame some of that pain and just, I mean, there's just suffering there. There's no other way to put it, to making that choice to do it, to take the risk again. What was going through your head, and how did you reconcile it?
Oh man. So even before wrestling, I was careful when I said this before. And I remember when I first mentioned it on one of my shows, I actually hesitated to send out the episode instantly because I was being very vulnerable. And when I was talking about the situation, because obviously we have learned, especially I'm pretty sure you have too as Flint, some things we do have actions. Even though if we sit there and have a confession or we have something, somebody is going to take that in a certain way that maybe it can affect our brand or something that we were looking at. So when this was going on, man, and I said for 8 months, I only had 12 pictures on my phone, and I would continuously look at them each and every day. And the sad thing is, I would talk to my phone because I wasn't getting a response back from my son. And, you know, with him being only 2 years old, my son really couldn't talk on the phone. My son didn't really fully talk until he was like 6. Him being a special needs son, being on the autistic spectrum, literally at 12 months old, him being diagnosed with neurofibromatosis at 12 months old due to 12 spots on his body, him having scoliosis and all these things. Like, it was just like, it was a tough thing to deal with because I couldn't accept it. And that's something like I've always learned, like, man, I mean, anybody know me? My dad was a military man. My dad, people would probably say it was bullying or, you know, bad parenting, but I think every single day of what he's done for me, because he made me the tough guy that I could be. Going through these things and dealing with the situation with my son, I don't wish that on anybody. And that was something that made me want to make this podcast and help the next person, because I read really bad statistically. People don't live through those. And 9 times out of 10, the most suicide rate is going to be a father, because you felt like in our mindset, we're always needing to be the provider. We need to be the one that's putting the clothes on the back, putting the food on the table, being that person that we believe that's parenting. And when you don't have that for 8 months, I don't joke about it, man. It felt like my son was dead. And it felt like I literally didn't have a child. And I had to remind myself continuously. And I had to stay off of social media. I was fully MIA for a good 3 or 4 months, man. I'm not scared to say it now. My thing was, if anybody's ever watched the show One Tree Hill, I always saw this thing. There was a scene where Peyton would drive on a car and she would drive on red, stop at green. Literally middle of the night, stuff like that. For some weird reason, I had that same idea and I did it for 2 months straight. And I would drive on red, stop on green. I work late at nights. I was working at a warehouse, so I'm making good amount of money, but I'm still depressed, man. I don't have my son. I'm living with my parents. I mean, I went from when I was 18, I said I was moving out. Like, I made set goals and I was doing everything that I've always set my goals to be. And this was all just crumbling on me. Like, I dropped college basketball. I dropped everything to be a father and to be there for her at the same time. And for what happened, it really just destroyed me. And when I say the one moment that happened, man, I said I did this for 2 months straight. I drove on red. Like, it was a normal thing. It was like a custom thing for me anymore. Like, I literally was almost seeing red as a green light nowadays. And I just sat there and was like, hey, drove on red like a normal night. And a 16-wheeler pulls straight in front. This is the moment. Like, this is what we've been waiting for. Eventually, it was going to happen. Am I going to swallow my pride and be that same arrogant person that's going to literally be like, hey, I've had this mindset already. I'm just going to go head on. If I live, there's a purpose. No, I turn. No hesitation. Swerve. Right off the side. And for the first time, I screamed. I wailed. I just let it all out. And then I even looked up. I mean, I don't know if anybody's religious or whatever. I looked up and said, I hear you. There has got to be another reason and another purpose. And then me being a pro wrestler and doing these things and, you know, getting into the courtroom and doing these things. And the first day I got to have my son back, my biggest worry was I didn't think my son was going to know who I was. And, you know, for him not being with me for 8 months, it's tough. And for me to miss a birthday, him to be taken a week before Christmas was a devastating time. And so when I first saw him again, which he couldn't walk, poor guy, he only could crawl. he just got his knee braces, his ankle braces. So like literally like the Forrest Gump type thing, just a rubber one, not the metal wooden ones anymore. And would walk towards me and go, "Daddy." And it just broke me because that was my biggest scare, was like, he still loves me. He knows who I am. And, you know, I may not be in his life every single day. I have learned every moment, treat it like it's every day. Treat it like you can continue it on. Your son looks at you like a superhero. Like, believe it or not, my son came up with this character. My son was a huge Spider-Man fan. And I got the concept from Spider-Man, and he came up with AP. So I was going to come out with the American prototype. And if anybody doesn't know, that was a future legend guy named You Can't See Me, Mr. Cena, had came up with that first. So good old me was not going to keep that name and think it was going to work type scenario. So me coming out with American Prodigy was basically, you know, the new up and comer, the dude that can really stand out and do something different. And for me to be this character that was outside of what was going on in my true life was actually a blessing, because at the time I felt like I don't have a purpose. Why am I here? I'm a father, technically fatherless. Like, what's my purpose? And that night, man, it really changed me. It really did.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that story, brother. Tell us about your family now, your wife and your daughter. Where did that come in? Was the healing already in process? Did they help with that? I mean, these are all issues, just from the court to the kiddos to not being there to having our hearts ripped out. These are all guys' issues, but we do find a way to heal and move on from that. Share that portion of your journey with us, if you would.
Man, if anybody's watched the Total Bellas episodes or whatever, where Cena made Nikki sign a paper before she got together with him and stuff like that, I was that guy. I was against being married. I was against being in a long relationship and stuff. And now I've even had some of the people message me and going, "I'm really glad that you changed," which was insane to me, because when all this was going down, I was only with one particular girl for a long time in high school. And when we broke up and stuff like that, I went around. And I mean, I dated any girl, not necessarily dated, but mine, thinking I'm dating them, and we're just doing certain things, and that was it. Because at that time, I'm believing that's all what women want. Because I gave everything to this one particular woman, gave everything that people wishes that they would have, because I was basically raised by my mom, you know, in that type of scenario. So I knew how to treat a woman at the time. But I was just like, man, they treat me like that. So obviously, and sadly, I looked at that mindset for so many things. Samantha just fell in my lap. And when I say another door just opens, waiting for me just to open it, that first night, which it's funny, we talked about it on my podcast. If anybody hasn't, check it out. I had my wife on, and I apologize if you hear any foul language. That's all from her. I couldn't do anything about it. That's the boss. But we went to Buffalo Wild Wings, and I remember I used to have talked with a lot of my friends. Shout out to my buddy Eric Moore and his wife Hannah. They were always telling me, like, "Hey, you need to find a girl. You need to, you know, find that next happiness. Like, there is legitimately good people around." And I mean, I saw it as a time for a little bit. But, I mean, I just enjoyed the fact that people liked me. You know, I thought that's what people were liking. That, you know, I'm going to the gym, very active. I work a job. I provide, do all the things I needed to do. And the funny thing is, me and Samantha just started hanging out one night, which it was not all pure love and fireworks were coming off at the time, because this is the date of hell. I'll just leave it at that one. So we get to the Buffalo Wild Wings, which I was late, 10 minutes late. And if you know, that's real bad. And it was raining, so made her wait in the rain. That was even I'm a charmer right there, let me tell you. We get to the restaurant. She's looking at me. she's mad, obviously. You know, I'm not thinking of anything. Like, hey, you know, hey, you showed up. Hey, that's cool. And we go in. She's like, I'm thirsty. I want a drink. Okay, no problem. Whatever. Have your drink. And she continued on telling me, oh, men do this, men do that. And I'm just like, I don't know how this is going to go. And it just was like just shooting it down like, this is not a date. This is not a date. This is not a date. And basically, I mean, this girl, she's been mistreated a lot when she was, you know, in her younger years and stuff like that. And I think some girls can relate to this. I used to not believe in it. I felt like it was all excuses, but some girls get treated wrong and they don't ask for it. And I told her, I said, you know, hey, one day, I don't know if it's today or next, someone's going to learn what's really in front of them, and they're going to treat you like you're their prized possession. And the bill came, and I took it from her and said, I got it. And I think that shocked her, because obviously a storytelling aspect of when I always, in my mindset, I'm always paying the bill regardless. And she should have known it was a special standpoint, because believe it or not, if I was only hanging out with you for a certain thing, we were going to Starbucks or something like that. I'm not going to sit here and be mean about this. Like, I even told them, like, this is what I'm seeing this as, whatever. I took her to Buffalo Wild Wings, so that's a big upgrade. And I paid for it, and she like paused for a second. And she was like, kind of early, let's go to a movie. And I was like, all right, whatever. And she's like, I'll drive. Like, she was adamant she needed to drive, which the story is she gets car sick, and I never heard of that before, but I'm with somebody that I probably drive 4 times since the whole time we've been together out of the 8 years. But we went to the movies, and the funny thing is, I'm thinking this ain't a date, this is just a hangout, whatever. She was mad I wasn't holding her hand, wasn't all over her and all this type of stuff, you know, because I'm thinking like, bro, I struck out before the door was open type scenario. So just seeing how this all went down, we went and saw Daddy's Home. And I know when I found out, she actually stayed, she was awake for the entire movie, which I never knew. Her family told me she always falls asleep when they go to the movie theaters or something. She can't ever last long to watch a movie or something. She will instantly fall asleep. So they knew that was the different transition standpoint of how she saw with me, because she was awake the whole time watching a movie and just enjoying herself, because she's like, you know, short temper, whatever. And I remember when she told me, like, she's not there for flings or whatever. She's looking to be settle down, be a mom, all these different things. And I mean, the rest was history. After that date, I kind of got a hint finally after the end of the night. She kind of digs me a little bit. So we started dating, going to church on Sunday, on that following Sunday and stuff like that, which I was supposed to go to work, and I called out, which it's okay to say now because it's been a pretty long time. So I don't think I get held accountable anymore. Yeah, I called out of work. And yeah, man, the rest was history. And I say, man, it was definitely tough at first because I'm just not used to being in that relationship scenario. But she was, and it was cool. And it was really different. Like, I was smiling all the time. We never really had arguments. But my biggest worry was when it was time when Matthew was going to come. And, you know, which at the time he wasn't in school yet. So Matthew was here a lot more during the months. I think it was like every other month we agreed to do something. And my biggest worry was, how is she going to react with him, knowing that he's not like the normal 3-year-old kid, you know. He's going to get upset because he can't verbally talk to you, express how he feels. He's not walking. You're going to have to be fully hands-on with him around. And no offense, that is a lot for someone that's just coming into a relationship type scenario and having to play a part. It is playing a part right now because there's no longevity standpoint with a dating scenario. And I was just blown away of how hands-on she was with him, how she did so well with him. And I mean, I changed all my beliefs, everything, due to that one moment, because I was just like, does something different when you're seeing a woman that doesn't have to even have a reason to be around this child. Do it exceptionally, even more exceptionally. And at that time, I'm like, man, she's going to make a great mother one day. And rest is history, man. And I laugh about it and smile about it now because in a way it helped me cope with the fact that I wasn't in my son's life as much as I wanted to be. But me having my daughter, having 2 kids, it's sad to say, I learned how to be a legit father with my daughter Annabelle, and grown with her from birth to what she is now at 5 years old has been a crazy, crazy ride. That's where all this is probably trialed into. But I mean, I wouldn't regret it one bit, man. Definitely.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Because, there's a lot of us, and I think anybody that's been in a relationship or a long-term relationship that ended badly, we get to that point where it's like, I don't want the hookup. I'm not dating again. I'm not getting married again. I can't count the number of people that said that. Heck, Des and I said that when we met each other, but it's the companionship. It's
they threw that weapon, man. That weapon, it's hard to refuse.
I'm telling you, it's like, man, we met with the express intent of not hooking up. Yep. We were both going through divorces at the time, and they were ugly on both sides. It was nasty. But we just wanted to talk to somebody. That loneliness, and I don't think we really address that much, is we're stoic and this and that. But when we come out of a relationship, especially one that involved children and long term, there's a lot of loneliness there, and that we get it deep into our own head, and it gets hard to crawl out of that hole sometimes. So I appreciate you sharing the story of going down into the hole, but also of coming out of it, because I think that's going to be very powerful moving forward. There's a lot of guys out there that are in that situation, a very toxic, they're currently in a toxic relationship. Yeah. And we see it more often than not, because we're all kind of dumb and stupid when we're young, and we make choices based on looks or the moment, instead of, we spend more time picking out our car than we do our future mate whenever we start.
I like that, man. That definitely could be a moniker on a t-shirt, because I would say this, and like you just said, man, because I think the biggest thing a man wants is comfort. And it's a typical day. Like, I think our minds don't read as well as the next person, because we're looking at it as, if we're doing our part, nothing should fall out of place type scenario. Because in a way, we plan it based off the day. We plan it based off of the going routine type scenario. If I'm pretty sure all men could agree to this, we don't really like change at the time. And, we have it in a routine scenario because that's how we adapt. So when you see that thing and you're so used to it for so long, like you just said, you got kids involved and stuff like that, it does some type of transition, because at the time, even if it doesn't matter whose party is wrong or right, whatever, you got your children that you got to live with. This part is like, all right, we're going to mom's house, we're going to dad's house. And it does something to them too, because it's like that one trigger moment, if you get onto them or something like that, and they look at them and go, is this what you did to such and such? Is this what did it? And it could really harm you in ways, because it's like, man, I thought I was doing well. I thought I was trying this. And then something like that. Luckily, and I say it all the time, luckily it was at a very young age for Matthew to deal with this, which now we have seen it growth in scenarios with him being 12 years old and stuff like that. I've seen stuff that he has kind of gotten more advanced in, because he looks at it, sometimes, especially at his school, he knows, okay, I got 2 mommies and I got 2 daddies. And he just tells me all the time, he's like, Daddy, I really could never picture you and mommy together. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. I try to, and there was one thing I always made sure of, and that's why I'm also very hesitant to make sure there's one or 2 episodes that he does never listen to on the podcast standpoint, which one reason why I do these podcasts a lot is because my son does watch these. He watches them like a cartoon show. He gets excited, like you just said about the intro. He loves that intro. He came up with the idea. He's like, Daddy, I got Batman and something like this. He's like, I want to see something like that on your show. So I went and played around and saw this stuff, and what I found, he's like, that's awesome. And it's like bright lights, something moving, stuff like that catches all his attention. And it was just like, seeing those transition and stuff, man. I live by a motto every single day. And it's a t-shirt now, which I shout out to Andrea Mason. She got me to do it as a t-shirt. But it is every setback makes one heck of a comeback, man. And it means a lot. I talk about it all the time, man. You're going to go through stuff in life. And I feel like that's some things that we need to learn. There is struggles, but we always want an upgrade. We always want to change. We always want something that's going to be in that comfort. You got to break out of the comfort. You got to learn, hey, man, you got to get out of y'all's normal routine if you want this exceptional standpoint. And that's something like I've learned with this podcast. I've learned with wrestling. I've learned with so much different things, man. I can't be so content anymore. And if I want to go to the next level, man, I'm going to have to step it up a little bit, with the podcast standpoint. Hey, I only do such and such, whatever. Well, guess what? If you want to get on this and this and this, you need to jump up a little bit, talk a little bit more energetic or something type scenario. Like you just got to find that little ick to keep it rising if you want to keep that growth. And I mean, that's something I live by every single day, man. I am so headstrong with stuff, which is sad now because I'm only 32. I feel like I'm like 50. And sometimes it's like 55 at the time. Sometimes, man, it's like, you look younger than me right now. So it's like, it's so funny. Like I have this ego and it's like, man, I can always hold my own. And that's something that I've always learned. I remember when I got on one particular fight, and I got beat because this dude knew jiu-jitsu. He knew all that type of scenario. Man, when I tell you I was the first person in a jiu-jitsu class the next time to learn how to particularly go after that one person again, man, 6 months of everything just so I could prove, I could beat this guy. Like that tells you determination and mindset type scenario because like, man, when I say I am dedicated into something, I'm fully locked in. And I will try to ante it up, make it an upgrade to whatever I can, man. And that's something I want someone just to take that acknowledgement. It's like, man, stop staying content and if you do your part, man, things will start rising up eventually. Don't ever just fully change your attitude or nostalgia just because that one particular person or whatever didn't see what you were. And that's something I had to learn was, hey, man, I can still be the guy that I've been from day one, but I just got to have my eye a little bit more open. And it's like, all right, everything's fine. I'm not going to get screwed over or whatever. I got really bad in that stick. All right.
we call it stop waiting for permission on here. It's like nobody's ever going to give you permission.
You ain't clicking the allow button every day now. You're going to have to just do it yourself.
You're going to get out there and who are you supposed to get permission from? Nobody. Nobody's going to give you permission to chase your own dreams.
Google.
It's like, who did you wait for your dad, your mom? I mean, your wife? No, nobody's going to do it. You got to do it for you. You got to do it yourself.
That's right, Flint. Tell them you want to walk sideways through doors. That's what it is.
I did that when we got off of your recording on your podcast. I walked down the hallway because my wife's desk is right there at the end. And I turned sideways and went through the door. She goes, what? That's why I don't fit anymore. Sugarhead called me an idiot and went back to her, whatever she was doing. It was hilarious. I'm curious because you touched on a lot of things, and you obviously, those of us that do this, either podcasting or like you with the wrestling, what have you, we enjoy the attention to some degree. Otherwise we wouldn't do it because it's not easy. It's hard. But I've found, and I'm curious if you found this too, is through the course of the podcast, it was uncomfortable at first to be vulnerable, never uncomfortable to tell the truth, but to tell those stories that maybe don't paint us in the best light. And those are the episodes that people tend to respond to the best, are the ones. So it's never easier to be vulnerable, but It's become more natural to be vulnerable for me as I've gone on. And this week is really going to prove that a lot with a lot of different things that we're doing. I'm curious from you, because you mentioned a couple of episodes where there's obviously some stuff like, okay, my kids can watch this, but not yet. Mm-hmm. They need to do this when they're much older. I feel the same way. A lot of my children, out of 7 of them, a lot of them follow the podcast. And hell, I didn't even know. Sometimes my daughter will call me up and she goes, yeah, I wait Thursday mornings for your podcast to drop so I can feel like I'm spending a little time with you. And then it makes you think, awesome, it's like, wait a minute, what did we talk about? Oh, but there's nothing bad. It's just like, oh, okay, wait a minute.
Every week.
How do you deal with that, or how do you feel about that? Just being vulnerable out there. I mean, we're putting our lives out there for other people. That's what we're doing.
Man, when I tell you, like I said, man, if anybody doesn't watch Buzzing with Marlo, I used to I post one episode a week. That episode, I don't kid around. I wish my mom could talk about it one day, and I still want to try to get her on the episode. 6 weeks hesitant to put that episode out. 6 weeks hesitant, and I wanted to make sure that was one of the most produced episode I've ever done in my life. Let's just put it this way. That one was the most produced episode ever. And like you just said, man, I played 2 parts. Even when I was, out of the wrestling ring due to a neck injury and stuff, had to drop it out and, basically, hey, you can't do this no more. And I had a major drought in that. Luckily, COVID happened a year later. So it was like everybody had to retire for a year, a little bit or so. But it's like, I believed everyone wanted to know who this guy was. Not who this guy. This guy. They love this guy. This guy is like, kiss your babies, I remember this guy was so popular, he's signing autographs on a $1 bill and stuff. I was hesitant at first, but hey, kids are giving me a $1 bill. I can't tell them no. So it's like, I remember someone had a championship Tom Brady jersey. I'm not a Tom Brady fan. Duval till I die. But
oh God,
he basically told his dad, and might I add, this guy just got this jersey from the Super Bowl. I had to autograph that, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, they want to know this guy. They don't care about this guy. And when I say I put that vulnerable episode out, I got more listens and more feedback than I had in any episode that year. Based off of season standpoints, and this is what I love about storytelling, especially in wrestling, I'm always about storytelling. What's the next thing to do? But I'm going to put you on a ride to see how well you are really going to invest in the go and to see what's going to happen. First season, being a transition to getting into the podcasting standpoint. First season was strictly all about American Prodigy, based off of, getting onto that stairway, every episode by myself. The one episode that stood out for me at first was when I could learn how to interview was, shout out to the twins, Rose and Samantha Collins, 2 girls that were seniors in high school. This is in their COVID year. And I wanted to hear their perspective of how they're dealing with the senior year at home. Like, I'm picturing my senior year, I'm wherever my girlfriend was, I wasn't really focused on anything until basketball season. And luckily I didn't have that to worry about that many credits, so I didn't have to be in school all the time. But it's like, hearing them, because it was so funny when I remember after the summertime came and it was their senior year, they were dreading to get up early. They were dreading about going back to class and stuff like that. 4 to 5 months later, you fast forward that, right after that Christmas break, and when that thing said, hey, we're shutting down. This is it. COVID's shutting it down. We're not going to schools. We're not doing this. That reaction from, oh, we got to get up early, we got to do this, is, I miss it. I'm going to go crazy. This is my last time in school. This is my memory. Like, we left when we got to go to a prom, but that's it. Like, in March, we're done. This is no school no more. I gotta be on a computer. I miss my friends. All this stuff. Like, your last years in high school, if anybody, I'm pretty sure everybody can agree, especially this, we don't see any of the people that we graduated with anymore. To see that standpoint. So in a way, they got a little bit an increased standpoint going, oh, you're going to get a reality after school standpoint. Your real friends, they're going to be the true testament if they're really going to be your friends in that long call standpoint, because y'all are not going to be in a lot of places that y'all can connect and all that anymore. And hearing their story about it, man, I'm not saying it made a big change, but they got a graduation out of it, because the longest time they were told they were not going to have a graduation, that they were not going to be able to put so many people in a building or on a field or whatever they were trying to do this concept and they finally got a graduation. Granted, it was a bubble type scenario, you know. Bubble Boy really became a reality at that time, but it was still the fact that they got a graduation out of it, and they got to see the kids and stuff like that. And that's where I learned, and I had a lot of people listen to it. My mom's my biggest critic. Love her to death. My mom has been my fan through everything. Samantha, she don't really follow a lot of stuff, but she listened to that one. She was just like, you sound like somebody that could be on like the news or something like that. And it just struck me. And I was like, all right, maybe we'll transition and start doing more interviews and stuff like that. And like I said, man, the first season was strictly just all about American Prodigy. Hey, I'm back, whatever. I'm alive. I didn't die. I took 5 pile jars, but I'm not dead, guys. Like, you know, it was kind of that story to like, they finally hit that tomb on the superhero. And it was like, you know, and then season 2, I became more myself. Season 3 was more of an interview standpoint, and then also to give back because I just found out a huge health update that I'm healthy. I went from a guy that had so many concussions and a half a broken neck to you don't even look like you've been hurt. Because I took a determination. I was like, you know what, hey man, I don't kid around, man. I stopped going to the gym for a little bit when I first got hurt because I'm like, I don't have a purpose anymore. And I transitioned that whole thing on that show. And I sat there and said, hey man, you don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. Like, I was very adamant on it. Man, when I went to that house one day and I pinched myself and I could actually pinch something and it's sticking out a little bit. Oh, you bet your butt. I don't care if I'm lifting my arms up for 15 minutes and I'm sweating. We're going to readjust this and we're changing that. And for me to get to do what I did for my 100th episode, if anybody I highly recommend that 100th episode. Highly recommend it. We had a guy on there that was talking crap on me on the pod. I meant for social media for 4 months. Leaning into this episode, I never announced who my guest was because I wasn't going to make it. I made it people believe like it was going to be no guest. It was just strictly going to be a 100th episode, really cool transition, whatever. And found out we put him on the podcast. We made a story like, oh, I'm just going to get him on and get him off as quickly as possible. But the funny thing was I was going to be the most disrespectful person because I didn't respond to anything he did on social media for 4 months. So when he was talking, I muted his mic. When he was on the thing, I put clips on in front of him while he was talking. So he was sitting there talking about his glory days, whatever. I hit a, hey, shout out to you, you know, top 100 episodes, da-da-da-da-da. And like we went for 2 hours where I just played around with him constantly. Let him go a little bit. All right, man, what's your story? Like, who are you? Da-da-da-da. And basically, at the very end, man, he called me out and I accepted. And the funny thing is, usually you continue that on because it's hot. You got to keep going. This was the differential thing. And I think a lot of people hated it at the time, but they loved it. And it was the smartest as a promotional standpoint was I cut the season off after that episode. After I just said, just to let you know, careful what you wish for. And I cut my camera off. He kept talking mess, whatever. And popped back on with my mask on. I said, you got it. And when I say that this live episode had the most reactions due to that little suspense feeling, I felt so special at the time because I was like, man, because obviously me being out of the pro wrestling standpoint and stuff like that, if you're in the indies and you're gone, you're forgotten. And that moment, and them to go to a WrestleCon thinking that match was going to happen there. And that was the biggest thing I had him on the show for because he was getting his big break to go a bit against a big time superstar type scenario. And people were going, let's go AP in that match. That was the part that I really learned that, hey, we've got something there. And then we played with it on season 4. I played little vignettes back and forth because we took a long story because I made this storyline, even though I had promotions messaging me right after that episode. Let's set it up. I've got a certain number, whatever you want. Let's go with it. And I kept denying it. I told him, you keep denying it. let's drag this thing out and see how far it can go. So the next season, I made it believe that, I took a season break so I could train myself to get prepared for this match, get myself prepared for this one particular match. Little did they know it was going to be a full run. And I took everyone on a roller coaster standpoint when we came to that episode. To us, they get into a big tag match, and it wasn't what everybody wanted. But then they realized, this ain't over. So they continued the feud on to a little bit longer, man. It was just a huge accomplishment because I really realized, like, man, doing the mysterious things and not being the predictable one, it does a lot. It does a lot. Like, we played with the little vignettes part, but then I would go straight into the interview like it's a normal show. Like, we did it like a TV show. Like, you get that little Easter egg, and then you just go back to the show like it's a normal thing. Like, it was just a part of the group. And you just made it look like, he just popped on again. Like, this ungrateful son of a gun, blah, 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 blah. And then you just do that interview like it's a nothing. Like nothing happened, which was the most funnest thing I have done so far doing this podcast.
So the podcast taught you to go from being a performer to being a true showman.
Yeah.
And being able to just cultivate that curiosity and sprinkle that in and learn to be a true performer as opposed to somebody who's reading a script or playing a role.
Yeah, man. I hate
That's
that.
it. What episode are you on now?
Whew. This Friday will be 169.
169. Man, I'm just a little baby compared to that. I'm still in the 30s.
Yeah. Well, I had a lot in the archives for a moment, but my producer / my lovely little 5-year-old decided she didn't like them, so they were gone.
Oh, that happens. But you know what?
Shout out to ABC Mouse. I'm thinking my daughter's on an education game trying to do her thing, and I come in here. And I had it announced, did it on the social media. Like, I even promoted on the X account, which is huge for me because I'm like, I'll learn how to do that, whatever. And I was like, I'm getting a good viewership on it. That's why I started addressing it, because I'm like, dang, I'm getting some good numbers on the X account. So I promoted this whole episode out. And then I go to look in the archives. I'm like, where is it? Like, every single one of them. No lie, Flint, 41 episodes. Gone.
Ouch.
Gone. And then I got the people reaching out. Hey, is this episode coming out today? Da, da, da. I'm like,
that's a lot of work.
I system updated and I can't find it. I don't know what to do.
I'm sorry. Oh, God, that sucked. I accidentally deleted my entire studio one time. I understand the panic. I had to go back to the host and say, is there any way you can recover this? They'd said, oh, yeah, it's easy. I'm like, why is that even a button? Why does that button exist? Come on. Well, we've been talking. Good Lord, we're pushing an hour. It's always easy to talk with you, brother. I mean, it flows, and we could do this for probably 2 or 3, but we definitely got to wrap it up at this point. Tell us what's coming up for American Prodigy, what's coming up next for Warren Marlowe. What are you doing and where are you going to be?
Hey, man. Obviously now summertime's coming, so my daughter's going to be home a lot more. We got my birthday coming up. We got my wife's birthday coming up this Friday. For me standpoint, Buzzing with Marlowe, you're going to be on, I think, Thursday. Our episode's going to be out on Thursday. And then I got a live episode, I think, Thursday night as well, because I can't do Friday because it's the wife's birthday, so I might get in trouble for that one. Taking her to WWE, which is so funny. Everybody thinks, you're taking her there because you want to. No, it was her idea, believe it or not. She wanted to go to WWE, so we're going to WWE. But Buzzing with Marlowe, we usually take a break in the summertime due to, my son being in the hospital for so long and stuff, due to his scoliosis and stuff. We kind of took a break during the season type scenario, so now I'm just going to be fully on in the summer, have some recordings and just have fun with it. It's been a great ride, man. And American Prodigy, he's going to be in Newton, Georgia, July 13th. Facing interesting talent, one of the top guys that I've ever seen in a promotion in a long time. And it's going to be interesting to find out if I can really keep up. And that's kind of sad now. I'm at that age where I'm looking at him like, can I keep up with this guy? That's going to be a story to tell. And then, of course, in obviously the areas that we're familiar with, I'm going to be in Baker County, July 26th, 28th, something like that. One of those. And I'm going to be in Baker County for DCCW. So it's going to be a wild ride for American Prodigy. He's going to be booked crazily this summer, but also I got to learn. Got to be a father. We got to be a husband first.
And I love that you led with that. Hey, here's my family commitments, and then here's where American Prodigy is going to be. Guys,
my wife would make sure of that one.
they tend to keep us in line. Well, guys, we'll have the links in the description of the video so you guys can catch that. I'll get those from Warren afterwards. Or Warren, please send them over to us. As far as Old Man Energy goes, we have got so much stuff coming up over the next. I have kids, but they're all adults now, so I got a little more flexibility than that. Tonight, there's going to be a live, which is not going to be relevant to this podcast, but you'll catch the replay. I am addressing with a friend of mine, Debbie Pasco, the man or the bear controversy that's going around, and everybody seems to be getting angry about that. So she and I are going to be sitting in the studio talking about that. Next week, we have our first live event in Orlando for OME Networking, which is my unique style of networking, how I've built my businesses. That's on the 21st. That's going to be at Kiwis in Altamont Springs. And then the first time ever on Wednesday, and I want to extend an invitation to you if you have time to sit in on this. I have Dr. Sandy Durham has sponsored a 2-hour webinar for men's issues. So what I've done is I am taking my 3-hour virtual boot camp and I'm taking it and condensing it down into 2 hours, going to pour some value into giving men space and voice to be able to talk about the challenges that we have. You and I shared some of that a little bit on here, about how we can overcome and how we can get our masculinity in our lives back. And I'm super excited about that. I've never done that format before. And this is a way to get access to something that I normally charge for, but she sponsored the entire episode, put it together. So that is a registration event, but it is a virtual event. So this episode will be out before that. So you guys make sure that you sign up for that. And everything else being on my calendar, I think I'm going to end up, you might want to talk about this too, especially if you're traveling a lot. I'm going to end up putting a calendar out there so people can see where I am and what I'm doing. Once you start showing up and popping up, people are like, oh, when can I see you again? What are we going to do? So
usually it's like a day after, like, hey man, I'm looking forward to you being. I just left. Like, what are you talking about?
Like, wait a minute. Oh, one story about that. And I love music, and I like weird music too. So this was in that, I'm in the episode here, but right after COVID, when all the bands started touring again, one of the bands that I've followed for a long time is I love baby metal out of Japan. And I was like, okay, they're touring America. Cool. I'm going to get tickets. The day after they played Orlando, I was like, oh my, I didn't think the tour started for another week. And then they didn't come back for 3 years. I was like, oh my God, I finally got to see them this last summer. So yeah, that definitely, when you want to see somebody, you're like, I want to take advantage. I want to see some of your performances too. So knowing where they are and not having to answer the same question 1,000 times.
Man, that's hilarious. That's nerve wracking, because I remember I did that on a Jaguars game. And this is when they were this was the last game before they made the playoffs. So I was like, dang man, I'm like excited to go to this game. Like I already bought the ticket for the next game because we're thinking, they're locked in.
Yeah.
They got blown out at home. And needless to say, we're not going. And I'm like, man, and this was going to be the first time going to Vegas and stuff at that time. I was like, what are we going to do about these tickets? And like, they even messaged us like, we'll refund you, but you're sorry for your loss. Sorry for your loss. They made it seem like we did a funeral type scenario. Like, what in the world?
It's like, what is going on? Listen, Warren, I appreciate you again jumping on here. Guys, if you will, go show Warren some love. Go watch Buzzing with Warren. Follow his podcast. Catch up with him on social media. Really cool, straight up dude. Look forward to talking to you again in the future, brother.
Hey, man, always, man. We can have chapter books of this stuff forever. But definitely, thanks, Flint. This was definitely a fun one, man.
Absolutely. 10-4. Love y'all. Peace.